Good morning. Please stand, join me singing We Sing of Golden Mornings. And before you start, we're going to welcome Paul Grove today, playing some beautiful guitar for us. Yeah, thank you. All right, stand, We Sing of Golden Mornings, please. We sing of golden mornings, we sing of sparkling seas, of prairies, valleys, mountains, and stately forest trees. We sing of flashing sunshine and life-bestowing rain, of birds among the branches and springtime come again. We sing the heart courageous, the youthful eager mind. We sing of hopes undaunted, of friendly ways and kind. We sing the roses waiting beneath the deep-piled snows. We sing the earth's great splendor, whose beauty round us glows.
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we say in short, create community, find meaning, and work for justice. We're glad that you are with us today. Our church is a very welcoming congregation, and we appreciate your unique experiences, background, beliefs, and lifestyles. And if you're one of our long-term members or have been with us for a very short time, or if you're joining us today for the very first time, we're so glad you're with us. And we're also very grateful and glad for those that are streaming with us today. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure also this morning to welcome our guest speaker, John Trombold, to the pulpit. I'm looking forward to his insights and knowledge about the ever-changing EV world around us. Before we get started, Lynn, you have some announcements?
Welcome home. Or in other words, welcome to the beginning of Home Week for our Generosity campaign, where our theme this year has been a nourishing, liberal, religious home. So an update for the week, we are currently at a level of $237,150 in total pledges for the promise to make those pledges in the next fiscal year, and 104 pledging units have responded. This week, we'll be reaching out to people who have ongoing pledges with us, but have not yet made a promise for the upcoming year. A huge thank you to all of those of you who have responded to the call to pledge. And if you're a person who likes to or plans to make a single contribution, pledging to do so sometime in the upcoming fiscal year is incredibly helpful for us so that we can plan on and know what we can expect to be coming in for the next year. What happens next is a continuing rise in this thermometer and a budget based on what our expected income will be to be presented to the congregation by the Board of Trustees at our annual meeting in June. So each week of our month-long campaign, we focused on one of our 4 words. We heard from Kelsey related to nourishing, from Bob for liberal, from Todd for religious, and now from me for Home Week. So have you ever had that experience of being a guest in someone's home where you're greeted by the resident, maybe 6-year-old, who wants to show you around? Do you want to see my room? These are my Legos, and here's where I keep my colored pencils. You can see my art on the refrigerator. Do you want me to show you where my cat sleeps? And you smile, and you nod, and you, of course, are very interested, or at least you pretend that you are. Well, this past week, I found myself in the role of that 6-year-old. when I was asked to give a tour of our beautiful church home to 3 young men from Gonzaga taking a freshman religious studies seminar where they were required to write an essay on a religious space. They were referred to us by their professor. None of them had heard of Unitarian Universalism, let alone been inside of one of our churches. I met them outside on the walkway. Come in, come in. This is our front entryway. It leads to our foyer. These doors were designed by Harold Belaise. Do you know of his work? We have a sculpture out back. I'll show you. This is our beautiful sanctuary. See how the light spills in? This gorgeous banner here hangs permanently, but our smaller one, made by the same fiber artist, changes seasonally. Here's our kitchen. There's a lot of coffee made in here. The right side of our oven doesn't work, but we'll get that fixed soon enough. Let me show you our chapel. Oh, and let's go outside to our memorial meditation garden. This carved cedar gate is a replica of one that stood on the grounds of our partner church in Transylvania, now Romania. Oh, look at this beautiful basalt water feature and the columns where we engrave names of those who have gone before us. Oh, let me show you our labyrinth. Oh, wait, let's go down the RE wing, where our rooms are named after well-known Unitarians or people who have made a difference in the world in a way that we admire. Look here, Sanger, Potter, Bartok, Thoreau, and on for a little more than an hour. They were lovely, obliging, smiling, nodding, asking me questions, even taking a few notes, I'm assuming for the essay they needed to write. After they left, like any other 6-year-old, quite proud of their home, I thought, oh, darn it, I forgot to show them our compost bin and our raised garden beds. Surely they would have loved that. Our church home is stunning, and I truly was proud to share it. But being a part of a church home goes far deeper than our beautiful building. Being home for me means being grounded, rooted, and belonging. It's a place where the key is under the mat and the porch light is on. It's a place of connection with others, comforting when necessary, as we share our joys, our sorrows, our milestones, but also a place that readies us for tomorrow in a world that can be harsh and cold sometimes. Here, we develop and demonstrate courage, taking us right out of that comfort zone, doing good work that matters in our community and beyond in the wider world. Home is where you learn, grow, and thrive. It's where you can get your questions answered. Or, in our case, as Unitarians, it's where you can get all your answers questioned. It's a place where we can be ourselves and restore ourselves when feeling weary. It's a place where we can connect, find a purpose, and make a difference in the lives of others. I know that's how many of you feel here too, or you wouldn't be here. And if you live too far away or are unable to actually come into this space, please know that the metaphorical porch light is on, and the metaphorical key is under the mat, and that no matter where you are or where you live, you're not alone out there. You belong here too.
Thank you, Lynn. Why don't we now take a few moments just to greet each other, say hello to someone you have not met before.
He's so shameful it spreads to all of us. I feel the shame, don't we? Yes. Hello there. Hi. Nice to meet you. I'm John. Great. Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll be listening. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll have more time to greet one another and share our stories during social hour after the service, which always includes coffee, sourdough bread, cookies, we'll enjoy. So we now turn from our informal greeting of one another to formally begin our service by lighting our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the symbol of our unity and solidarity, of our openness and inclusion, of our community and individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt where it has been found. My opening reflection today is from Rachel Carson, author of Silent Spring. And I'll repeat it because it took me several readings to make sure that I captured the meaning of it. So, only within the moment of time represented by the present century has one species, man, acquired significant power to alter the nature of his world. Only within the moment of time represented by the present century has one species, man, acquired significant power to alter the nature of his world.
Please stand, join me for Find a Stillness number 352. Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
We will now kindle our candles of care. And each time as we gather, as a congregation, there are always those who are with us in our minds and our hearts, and who we want to wrap in our love and care. We kindle candles of care for those in Ukraine and the Middle East who are facing the continuous struggles with the battles that are taking place there. Let us share a moment in silence, embracing others who are here and here in our hearts and minds this morning. And you're welcome to share their names out loud if you're comfortable. Those named aloud, and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering elsewhere in our world at this hour, we hold in our community of compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which sustains this community and its mission to the larger world.
Thank you for the beautiful music, Paul. And I'm here to tell the story for all ages, I see. Just one kid, very close here. So after my story, we'll have the drawing, and somebody will help us to find the winner for the honey. But as you know, the generosity campaign continues. But instead of I couldn't find anything about generosity. Actually, I found a story about greed, the opposite to generosity. And it is an old English tale, which is called A Tale About a Baker's Daughter. Once upon a time, there lived a baker with a nickname Thin-Lipped. Strange. Because he never gave away as much as a crumb of bread. His daughter was even worse. Not only she was mean, she often insulted the poor. One day, an old woman looking like a beggar with a walking stick, remember the walking stick, entered the baker's shop. The woman asked if the baker's daughter could spare her a little bit of dough. Why should I? If I give dough to everyone coming through this door, there won't be any left, said the daughter. Sorry, said the old woman, I don't have any money and I'm hungry, she mumbled. Whose fault is that? Said the baker's daughter, and then added, think yourself lucky today. I'll bake a small portion of dough for you. The girl pulled a very small piece of dough off the floury lump on the table behind her. Then she placed that piece into the oven beneath the tray of big, well-shaped loaves. Soon the girl opened the oven and, to her great surprise, she saw that the woman's dough roll appeared to be the biggest loaf there. Oh, I am not giving this to you if that's what you think. You'll have to wait, said the baker's daughter, and twisted off another tiny piece of dough, half the size of the first small piece. She shoved it into the oven under another batch of her big balls of dough. But sometime later, the tiny piece of dough swelled even more than the first piece. Oh, no, certainly not this one. The baker's daughter squeezed off a third piece of dough, as small as her thumb, and shoved it into the oven under the batch of cakes, and then slammed the door in anger. After a while, the girl opened the oven and was shocked to see that the third piece was the biggest of all loaves of bread. Why, what the... Who are you? The baker's daughter turned to the beggar woman. Tell me, who, repeated the old woman. That's all you'll ever say again. The old woman raised her stick and touched the girl's shoulder with it. At once, the baker's daughter turned into a bird and flew straight through the door, crying, hoo, 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 hoo.
Okay, this is our last drawing for a beautiful jar of honey from Tate's Honey Farm, right here. And that will be either given or delivered or shipped to somebody who has pledged to our church for the next fiscal year. All your names are in here. This is Jude. He's going to do our drawing. You want to read it?
LJ and Theo. Otto.
From Cheney, Washington. We won't have to ship it too far.
So you finally have to ship it. Yeah. You finally have to ship it.
Thank you.
Thank you. As we move into a time of meditation, find a comfortable position. Put your feet on the floor if you wish. Close your eyes. Breathe softly. And just listen. Hear the wind gently blowing through the budding leaves. Hear the soft buzzing of bees as they flit from flower to flower. Hear the birds twitter and chirp as they feed in the morning and evening. Hear the patter of raindrops on your umbrella during your daily walk. Hear your heartbeat. Thank you very much, Paul. That was beautiful. John Trombold is a Spokane resident who administers the Nextdoor group Electrify Spokane, which focuses on electric vehicle adoption and home electrification. These interests arise from a recognition of climate change and the need for ordinary people to take action in ways that will, in total, affect the consumer markets driving the necessary energy transitions. He's influenced by Saul Griffith's book, Electrify Everything, and such organizations as Rewiring America. John has served as a professor of English at North Idaho College for 16 years. He earned a Ph.D. in English at Columbia University after graduating from the University of Washington and Reed College. He drives an electric vehicle and has installed solar panels and a heat pump, along with an induction stove, in his home. In that home, he shares with his wife, Brent Davies, and his teenage sons, Charlie and Ben. Please join me in welcoming John Trombold.
Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm going to make this as direct and brief as possible. Unfortunately, I find that I created a longer presentation than I have time for today, so I'm learning as I'm going about that. I'll just say that my first affiliation or organization was in high school, at Mercer Island High School, where I was a member of the infamous Committee to Save the Earth. We managed a recycling center there, and as part of that work, I learned about the economics of recycling and that metals are valuable for recycling and the most economically viable thing to be recycled, the reason being that they require a lot of energy to make. And so I saw the connection between environmental politics and the politics of energy then. And in the following years, I faced a debate topic, which was national at the time, and the debate resolution was, should the United States adopt a national energy policy? And to this day, 45 years later, we still do not have a national energy policy. So that's part of our problem. We are instituting policy through other means, through the tax code and the like, and through such legislation as the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed a few years ago and now is being implemented, which has strongly affected the economics of alternative energy, new technologies that are being implemented, including the supply chain, the battery production, for example, for electric vehicles. So let me turn to my presentation, and please interrupt if you would like, if you have a question prompted by any slide. I'm not beholden to these slides, and I'm happy to simply discuss the topic independently of them, but there are some useful visual aids here. So again, Electrify Spokane is the Nextdoor group, which I started because I noticed that Nextdoor is where people discuss electricians and HVAC installers and contractors, and that was the audience I wanted to meet, because I think there's a big gap between those who are pushing the energy transition, which we sorely need because of global warming, and the ground level where contractors do their work. So it's a place for discussion and for dealing with some of the complications of the energy transition at the household level. Next. Oh, I should also mention that the electric bus there at the start is an important part of Spokane. We have electric buses available to us, and obviously electric buses are more efficient and more environmentally sound than any car because of the number of people who can be transported by a bus. Next. This is an advertisement from 1912, which reminds us of the good old days when, for a moment, there were more electric vehicles in New York City than internal combustion engine vehicles. This is in 1912. So prior to World War I, there were more electric vehicles in New York than internal combustion engine vehicles. There were charging stations on the streets of New York with, supplying energy to lead-acid batteries. So this advertisement notes that a wife is very happy when she receives the gift of an electric car. It's from the Electrical Vehicle Association of America. Next. Yes. Thank you for reminding me. The past is a good lesson to us because in Spokane, the electric trolleys and the electric train, the interurban between Spokane and Coeur d'Alene, were in service and were powered by local hydro. Think of the lack of emissions from such a system and the ability to transport large numbers of people without traffic jams, and what an amazing model that is for this area as we consider the possible future of transportation. So more to be said about that. This is a reminder that all of these details of the energy transition are wonderful fodder for people with obsessive compulsive disorder and those of us who drink too much coffee sometimes in the morning. Next. This is an important book by Michael Mann. It's his most recent book. He's written a number of them. It is Our Fragile Moment. We lost the first word in the title of the book, unfortunately, when I cut that off. How lessons from Earth's past can help us survive the climate crisis. He is a climate scientist. He is the author of the classic hockey puck graph, which shows us rising levels of greenhouse gases, specifically carbon dioxide. Next. Here is the hockey stick graph, which shows us how our industrialization of the world using fossil fuels has contributed to greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere, which of course is, evidence of which comes from ice cores, usually, and from other sources that show us the percentage of the atmosphere that is made up of greenhouse gas emissions. Next. Here's the longer version of the same graph, which shows us the last 2,000 years. So in a short time, in thinking about that Rachel Carson quotation, we have had a monumental impact on the Earth in this particular respect, in addition to other effects. Next. This is a reminder of ordinary aspects of our internal combustion engine system that we take for granted and see regularly without giving them a second thought. The oil that drips from cars on our highways and roads and in our garages makes its way to our rivers and streams. Next. This is something new. In the last few years, almost all of the local ski areas have invested in snowmaking machines, which is symptomatic of global warming because our ski season is shortening. To make snow, you have to have freezing temperatures and a water source, and so it's possible to manufacture snow for those lower slopes closer to the lift where people need to go to the bottom. So the climate is changing, and this is evidence of it. Next. More obvious symptom of climate change is the drying forest and the increasing tendency for frequent and severe fires. And recent fires in Medical Lake and north of Spokane, known as the Oregon and Gray fires, had a big impact in burning hundreds of houses. With that, we should note that insurance companies are taking stock of the increased risks, and in California and Florida are declining to insure some houses, and so people are faced with that reality and forced to sell their homes at a much lower price than they might have bought them for in some areas. In Eagle Ridge and Cheney, I know that some insurers are declining to offer coverage for homes when they had previously. So that is a local effect of the trends that I'm discussing. Next. When we consider the supply chain of the fossil fuel industry, we need to take note of the effect of refineries in Louisiana and East Texas, where communities of color live in what's known as Cancer Alley. There's a very high rate of cancer among the communities that live in close proximity to oil refineries, which, by the way, also use an enormous amount of electricity to refine the oil into gasoline and other products. Next. This is from the Niger Delta, just a photograph from a news article which recounts the half-century of oil spills in Nigeria, which is associated with the oil extraction there. So the consequences are widespread, and these regular oil spills often pass without much media notice. The bigger events such as the BP Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, or say the Valdez spill in Alaska before that, attract a lot of media attention before, of course, it fades from media, which is, has a short memory. Next. This is a girl in London who died a couple of years ago. She died of asthma. She had a serious asthma attack. She had regular problems with asthma. She lived on a street in London which was frequented by trucks, which they call lorries there, and the diesel particulates affected her badly. And so when she died, the coroner in London identified air pollution as one of the causes of her death. Next. So on that note, the shift to EVs could prevent millions of childhood asthma attacks. This is from an environmental newspaper called Grist, which is based in Seattle. Next. This is a reminder, this article about a lawsuit, that in the United States there are tens of thousands of uncapped wellheads. They're called orphaned wells, which are no longer productive, that emit a lot of methane. And this methane, like natural gas itself, which is mostly made up of methane, has a significant effect on the climate because methane is 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So we'll turn to natural gas in a moment. Next. This is a tar sands mining operation in Alberta, Canada, which is a petrostate, could be compared to Saudi Arabia, Russia, or Texas because of its focus on the extraction of fossil fuels, much of which comes into the United States in pipelines. It's bitumen is what it's called. But the area affected by this strip mining there is compared to the geographical area of the entire state of New York. So it's quite enormous, and our fossil fuel dependency requires extraction of this kind. Yes, next. So as we compare supply chains, we need to recognize that every product has an environmental cost, and that is true of electric vehicles as well, because the lithium-ion battery, which is a technological revolution making these cars possible, often includes cobalt, and most of the cobalt is mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is an artisanal mine in Congo where there are no regulations and there is labor exploitation. There's child labor in these mines, and sometimes children are killed. So labor organizations have raised the issue, and this is an important issue of the supply chain for lithium-ion batteries, one that we cannot easily avoid, I think, as consumers, because this phone has cobalt in it, as do all cell phones. The catalytic converters on internal combustion engines have cobalt in them. That's why people steal catalytic converters, because of the value of the cobalt that's in those converters. So every vehicle, whether electric or not, in the lot of the church currently has cobalt in it. And it's good to be mindful of the realities of supply chains around the world and the economics of these things and the social costs. There's no easy solution, but they nonetheless need to be addressed. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, most of the mining operations are owned by China, which makes it even more difficult for the United States and the Americans to influence the results, but we have our own mining history and legacies to consider as well. Next. This is a cobalt mine in Salmon, Idaho. So it's very interesting that there is the possibility of cobalt production here. This is on, I believe, Forest Service land, and it is an environmental issue because there's a history of mining there. There's also a history of mining in the Silver Valley, where, as my students know who do research on the Silver Valley, and some of whom come from those mining communities, the tradition in the United States is for the externalities of the market to be ignored by the mining companies and the shareholders who make profit. The externalities, namely the toxic materials that they leave that drain into Lake Coeur d'Alene through the South Fork of the Coeur d'Alene River, are addressed by government. So the Superfund site that has been established there is spending $1 billion on cleanup. Sometimes mining companies pay fines for pollution, but generally speaking, our history is that externalities to the market, namely environmental destruction and even global warming, are not something for which the polluters must pay, right? That is part of our legacy, this question of what makes a market and who pays for what. Next. So here's just a headline reminding us that our phones have cobalt in them, but recently electric vehicles have surpassed phone use of cobalt. Next. And there's some data about where things come from. Australia is well situated for the energy transition despite its dependence on coal historically, and it does export a lot of coal to China, which is another issue. But this is a reminder that the DRC is the main source of cobalt currently. Next. So the energy transition does not move in a straight line, and it's full of contradictions and questions of identity as well as politics and economics. I found this quite amusing to see a Tesla owner has an anti-Elon sticker on the car, and I think I know whose car it is. It was Paul Lindholtz's car, and so I'm not surprised by that discovery. Next. So again, culture, politics, economics, energy use, they're all mixed together. And this person seems to feel that there's a religious connection between himself and his gas tank. Next. So, perspective. Tesla makes the most electric vehicles purchased in the United States. In fact, the Model Y is the most popular car in the world, which is an extraordinary achievement for all of Elon Musk's faults. And I could take a long time to enumerate them for you, but we don't have time. Other companies are struggling to catch up with what Tesla has done, and they dragged their feet, and they hesitated, and they dilly-dallied. So Tesla has shown them it's possible to make electric vehicles profitably, and that is a monumental achievement that is very important to remember, even as we recoil in horror from Elon Musk's personal politics and some of his actions. Next. This shows you the trends of purchases of battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid vehicles, so BEVs and FEVs, if you like, globally, and you can see the trend line, right? The United States is following in the wake or behind China and the European Union. So these other parts of the world are more advanced in this transition than are we. Next. Here we see in the United States, we have now surpassed the 1 million vehicle per year mark in EV sales. Next. And here we see the relative decline of internal combustion engine sales and the increase in electric vehicle sales. Next. More data showing the trend despite the news this quarter about Tesla's rough quarter and also the news about the decline in the growth rate of new EV sales, a fact that's been twisted and misrepresented in headlines. The overall trend is for massive increase in the adoption of electric vehicles. So that trend is not stopping. The issue is the rate of change. How fast will we execute the change? How quickly will we execute the energy transition generally from fossil fuels to electricity? And before I forget, I'm going to mention Saul Griffith's book, Electrify Everything. He's an engineer who lives in San Francisco. He's from Australia. His book is a very valuable source. I have 2 copies left to loan to people. You can borrow that and return it to me or loan it to somebody else who has an interest in that topic. I also recommend Abe Books for used books. And this book is 1 year old now, so it's the perfect time to pick up a copy of that used. Next. So EV prices are declining, and they're getting close to the cost of the average internal combustion engine vehicle. The thing to also consider is that the total cost of electric vehicle is less over time than an internal combustion engine vehicle because of the high cost of maintenance and fuel for an internal combustion engine. So that's really something to consider. The more miles you drive, the more you save if you drive an electric vehicle rather than an internal combustion engine vehicle. A rule of thumb is to keep your old internal combustion engine vehicle as long as you can, and when it's near the end of its life, then buy an electric vehicle. I've never before in my life bought a new car. I've used only used cars in my life until a year ago when I bought an electric vehicle. So it was the first time I've ever done it. And it was after our minivan with 242,000 miles was ready to pass. So it went as a donation to the public radio station. Next. What? What did you end up buying? I bought a Rivian R1S, which is probably a little more expensive for us than would be appropriate, but I rationalize it in many ways, and I'm pretty good at it. You can ask my wife, she's sitting there. Next. It's not a truck, no, it's an SUV, yes. It seats 7. I haul soccer players and skiers in it. It's been great going to 49 degrees north, where I'm a ski team coach. Anyway, so yeah, I have much to say about winter conditions, electric vehicles, which might be a question in your minds. Next. Oh, that was a slide about lithium prices, lithium-ion batteries. The cost of those is declining rapidly, and that is extremely important for the energy transition. And it's showing utilities, for example, that it's more valuable for them, objectively, if they're inclined to be objective, to buy utility-grade batteries rather than build new gas plants. So we have variable energy sources that are intermittent. With batteries, we can provide a buffer and avoid the costs of some new energy plants that pollute. So batteries are an extremely part of the energy transition. Next. This is a very important depiction of the relative efficiencies of the internal combustion engine, a hybrid vehicle, and an electric vehicle. And this is the kind of thing that the engineer Saul Griffith dwells on at length, because it is a key to the practical value of the energy transition that we're making. When we electrify, we rely on electric motors or heat pumps, which are far, far more efficient than combustion sources of power. So the gas car uses only a fraction of the energy available in gasoline. Much of the energy goes to noise and heat, right? Which is very important if you're 17 and need to make an impression on the world. And some people complain about that. Electric vehicles are too quiet. They're too, smooth. They're too this or that. Or they don't have a soul. Well, because they don't make so much noise is what is going on. Yeah. The electric vehicle is extremely efficient, and therefore the aerodynamic issues of vehicles traveling at high speeds loom larger. In other words, there's a reason why Teslas are shaped the way they are. They are extremely aerodynamic. We don't notice aerodynamic issues as much with gas cars because they're less efficient. And so those of you who know math can tell me how it is that a percentage of the, how it affects the percentage of energy used. So it's more obvious in an electric vehicle how aerodynamic your vehicle is than it is in an internal combustion engine, because internal combustion engine vehicles are less efficient. Any engineers in the room? Anyway. Next. This is a Ford F-150 Lightning. It's an electric vehicle, and this man works for the water department, and they have 8 of them, he told me, and he's not an EV nerd or an energy nerd, but he enjoys the torque of the vehicle. He likes the truck. He knows that it's perfect for stop and go driving all day. Yes? I don't know the answer to that. I think there might be options, and there's also option with battery size with the trucks. So in the case of city utility vehicles, one of the advantages is I don't think they need such large batteries to go long distances. And the regenerative braking in electric vehicles is a wonderful thing if you're doing many stops, right? If you're delivering things, you're doing the last delivery for Amazon and the like, or the post office. If you use an electric vehicle, you don't have to brake. In fact, I never use the brake on my electric vehicle. The braking is done with the resistance of the motor, which has only one gear. So when I take my foot off the power, it slows down quickly, rather as it is done when you're going downhill and you shift into low gear to slow yourself down and not rely on your brakes so much, right? The inertia of the engine is a factor in slowing you down. The same thing happens with an electric motor. The benefit of an electric motor, though, is that it generates electricity from the braking action of the motor, and that electricity goes back into your battery. So you actually gain battery power by going downhill in an electric vehicle. Next. This is the Kia EV9. It's in Portland, and just So you know Hyundai and Kia are doing amazing things with new battery and technology and electric vehicles in general. So keep in mind that some companies are doing better with energy transition than others. Legacy automakers in general are struggling because they have invested 100 years in research on internal combustion engines and how to make them. It's new, and the pure electric vehicle companies have an advantage. They're more nimble. They can do more and produce quickly. The Fords and GMs of the world are challenged. Ford is doing pretty well. GM has had moments, and some of their vehicles are good, and they're getting better. But Kia and Hyundai are doing very well, and they have a very impressive charging curve for fast charging. And there's more. I'll say more about that in a moment. Next. This is a Chevy Bolt. A neighbor of mine, Kurt Gauss, bought one in December for $18,000. EVs that are below a certain price, I believe it's $45,000, are not subject to state sales tax. So that's a wonderful benefit. Also, they're eligible for the tax credits that are part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is complicated and specific to each model of car. So if you have questions about any of these things, by the way, you can always ask at my, at the moment, or also in my group, Nextdoor group, Electrify Spokane. Go ahead. They had trouble with, well, so the Volt was a hybrid. The Bolt is a pure BEV, a battery electric vehicle, and it has a range of 260 miles, and it's ideal for a daily commute and grocery shopping, which is what most of us do. The average American drives only 30 to 40 miles total per day. We think we need extraordinary range. In reality, we don't. Even our long-range trips are getting easier with electric vehicles because of the proliferation of charging stations. But I'll say more about that in a moment if I have time. Good. Next. So this is from an app called PlugShare. You can download PlugShare and enter the name of any city and see where all the chargers are, the public chargers. And then you can tap on them and see what kind of charger it is and how many people are currently using them, and see people's comments on the chargers. So some charging networks are better than others. I have to say, Tesla has the best charging network in the world on 3 continents. They're very reliable, they're very well engineered, and they have over 50,000 superchargers in the United States. So it is called PlugShare. And it's blue and white, has a blue charging plug on it. And so next, this is commentary in PlugShare about chargers. And specifically, they're commenting on the Tesla station in Moses Lake, which is very important because it reminds us of the sea change that has occurred. Since December, it has been possible for non-Tesla vehicles to charge at Tesla stations, which has been very important for me with a Rivian, because Rivian and all non-Teslas rely on CCS, that's the Common Community Standard. Tesla has the NACS, North American Common Standard, and Tesla is now becoming the absolute standard. Tesla is opening its stations up to drivers of non-Tesla vehicles. So one by one, all of the other auto manufacturers have made agreements with Tesla, except Lucid, because the CEO doesn't get along with Elon, and that hasn't happened yet. So this is discussion of the Tesla station at Moses Lake among people who are not necessarily Tesla owners. And the Moses Lake charging station there, Tesla supercharger station, at the George supercharger station, and in Boardman, Oregon, at the supercharger station, there is something called the Magic Dock. If you're a non-Tesla person, you tap on that on your app, and you hold the button down, you push up, and an adapter comes off on the cable so that if you have a CCS charging port like I do, you plug in and you can use the Tesla charging. So I've used all 3 of those supercharger stations using the Tesla charging system on a non-Tesla vehicle. Yes? Yes. Right, you have a CCS which also functions as a J1772. So when you look at PlugShare at hotels, you want to see how many J1772 chargers they have. Yes?
My
Hyundai has an agreement. They're in line. It's happening. I think that, like me, you're going to be waiting for an adapter to come in the mail, right? And so once I have this adapter, then I'll be able to use any Tesla cable, like even level 2 charging at a hotel, and charge with it. And that's a sea change for us because Tesla's charging system has been exclusive to Tesla. And now those of us who don't have Teslas will be able to charge with all Tesla chargers of any level, any capacity, once we have the adapter that comes to us. So the adapter will come. In the meantime, the only way to do it is to use the magic dock, it's called, at certain Tesla supercharger stations. Our local ones are Boardman, Oregon, Moses Lake, and George. Next. So just basic information about charging. You can charge in many different ways, and our country is electrified and has been even in rural areas since the 1930s because of the Rural Electrification Act. So the NEMA 1450, there's a multi-prong one on the left, is the kind of plug you have that serves your washer and dryer often, right? That is a good way because it's higher voltage, it's 240 volts, and it's faster than level 1 or 120 volt? We're 120 volt in the, 110, excuse me, thank you. So we have used 110 volt in our kitchens and our households, and we can charge our electric vehicles with that. It's very slow. It's important to know this though, because and I just found this is very important for me when I first started thinking about this is, well, what happens if I run out of power, right? Because I don't know about the system that I'm going to be relying on. And then I realized, oh, I can go to any recreational vehicle, what do you call them, location, campsite, and plug in. So in a crisis, I could rent a spot at an RV campground and plug in. Because everywhere in the United States, generally speaking, we have electricity. That's valuable to know. Yes?
How much does it cost you to charge a car?
Oh, well, that's a really good question. It's not simple to answer. We are generally charged 8 cents, 10 cents, and 12 cents by Avista, depending on our usage for electricity, right? And so I estimate that the cost of powering my vehicle with electricity is 5 times less than the cost of using gasoline in the similar sized vehicle. So there's a lot of savings in the fuel that powers the vehicle, especially if you drive many miles. And that's why you can see the Postal Service should already have electric vehicles. Yes?
Range seems to have been a problem for a lot of people. Could you talk a little about the future with solid-state batteries coming out?
Okay, well, solid-state batteries have been announced, especially by Toyota, for a decade. And they're always saying that it's a couple of years away. And so I'm happy to hear that good news repeatedly. I look forward to it, really. But I also am very practical in light of the immediate needs and the pressure of global warming on us, right? We need to decarbonize quickly. And so I think we need to express a preference for what is at hand. And so hydrogen vehicles are not there yet, right? And they don't compete economically with electric vehicles. Lithium-ion batteries are what we have available, and that's what works well. Solar and wind are less expensive than other sources of energy now. That, by default, should be what we build. But there's bureaucratic opposition and vested interests to consider. Yes?
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
You do have solar power at home.
Yes.
Have you ever tried to figure out what
Well, you're talking about complicated math now. Yes, my power for my car is free some days, especially in the middle of the day. I love charging. I love plugging in my car. And I even have the ability with a Tesla Powerwall system to see the amount of energy coming into my solar panels. And I can see the household demand. When I plug in my car, I can see how much that demand increases, and I can actually see the power going from my solar panels into my car, and that's magical. Because a few years ago, that was not technically possible, right? So, but the thing, of course, is the solar panels have a cost, more than in Australia, where they're 25% of the cost that we pay. So Australia is doing very well with its sunshine and its low-cost panels from China. In Sydney, they have so much solar power on residences that they have negative pricing of electricity in the middle part of the day. Yes?
Just kind of the anomaly.
Next.
The Electrify America, what we have around here,
Yes.
are 56 cents per kilowatt hour.
It varies, actually, yes.
Yes, and this, because I keep all this track of the spreadsheet, this is 12 cents including the city tax.
8, 10, or 12. I like to use 10 because it's easier math.
I use 12 because I know what it is.
Yes.
So it's, if I'm on the road, it's 5 times more expensive for the electricity, and I compare that with gas prices
Yes.
from 25 miles per gallon to 55 miles per gallon. And there's a point at which it's less gas when I'm driving long distance because I'm using Electrify America.
It's more complicated, and I would say that using electricity for long distance travel is the same or a little less than the cost of gas. Probably with our current gas price today, it still beats it financially. But most of our miles are local miles, right? So how often do we go on long trips? We imagine we go on more long trips than we actually do, I think. We also imagine that our bladders can last a lot longer than they actually do when we're on the road. So we actually need more time. Yes?
John, I just heard from somebody streaming. If somebody asks a question, could you please repeat the question?
Oh, thank you for reminding me to do that. Yes. Good. So this is a depiction of 3 chargers at Ritzville. And so there is a Tesla charging station, there's an EVgo charger at a gas station, and then the Electrify America charging station there, which I use and all non-Tesla drivers use. And that's one where I often stop. Next. So these are proposed future charging stations. The point is we're going to see more of them. We have a lot more than we did in the past. And I think that once we have chargers every 50 miles, there'll be a lot less concern about range. Even now, I find range is not an issue for me at all. I've driven recently, in the last few weeks, taking my son to college campuses to Bozeman, Missoula, Bend, and Bellingham. So he's 18. Occasionally, he's a bit impatient with the additional, time for charging. I would say it's another 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the length of the trip, because of the time it takes to charge my car. But then again, it doesn't hurt me to stretch my legs a little bit more. And sometimes we buy burritos and eat them in the car while we watch the charging happen. And then I'll just add the anecdote that we were in North Bend at the Electrify America charging station there the other night. And I saw a woman trying to charge at an EVgo charger, and she was having difficulty with her Nissan Leaf. So I went over to help her, and we were talking about it, and finally we decided that she should give up on that network and that app and use the Electrify America network and app, which she had to download. So she parked her car next to mine. We kept chatting, and it turned out that she was a professor of music at Western Washington University and a jazz violinist, and that she was also a college advisor. And my son and I were, of course, in the throes of deciding which college he should attend. So she said, well, let me talk to him. And so then we retrieved my 18-year-old who was wandering around the parking lot. He began a little conference session with her, and she said that I should go away for a while. So I did, and I went for a little walk. Anyway, I would say that, early adopters, EV adopters, are an interesting group of people, and I don't regret any of the time I've spent at charging stations. So just as a social note. Yes, next. So this is at Ritzville at the Electrify America station, and you can see how many kilowatts I'm getting, 213 kilowatts. So that's a pretty decent speed of charge. Remember, Kia and Hyundai have the best charging curves, so that as the chargers improve and their speed improves, those kinds of vehicles are going to be able to take advantage of it the best. Porsche also, by the way, has an amazing charging curve. So these technologies will trickle down and become more universal. Next. So these are the supercharger stations I mentioned, one in George and one in Moses Lake, and this is from the Tesla website, and it identifies them as superchargers open to non-Tesla. If you are doing this for the first time, it's helpful to have a friend who you can call. A number of my friends have gone to Seattle and bought electric vehicles, and then on the way home have called me at charging stations. So I've helped them through the initial steps. The first time you do it, it's a new world and it's a little bit breathtaking, right? Once you've done it a couple of times, it's not hard. It's not as scary as it is at first. Next. Here is the Tesla station in Boardman, Oregon. Beautiful Boardman, Oregon. And I'm using a Rivian to charge from a Tesla. And this was in December. So that was, again, a sea change for the charging network locally. Next. All right, so for the engineers, this is the energy flow matrix in the United States, and this is the kind of thing, a Sankey diagram it's called, that Saul Griffith loves to pay attention to. In the bottom paragraph, which is too small for you to read, it mentions that the primary energy required on the left side is actually an estimate that can be challenged given the greater efficiencies of electric motors and the longevity and in other words, again and again we find electric motors are very, very successful. We have electric generators in dams too. How long have they lasted? You can think about the longevity of the parts. Internal combustion engines have belts and carburetors and ignition systems and other moving parts. And if you have a used car, you learn about them all because you have to pay to have them all replaced. And frankly, the American Dealership Association is well aware of the amount of profit they make from repairing and maintaining cars. And so don't look to them for objective review of the value of electric cars compared to internal combustion engines. In fact, that's also a reality of our political system at the moment. There are vested interests that resist the change for financial reasons. But for the consumer point of view, electric vehicles are better. I would say that you tend to wear out tires more, especially if you like to show off your torque and how fast you can go from 0 to 60 with teenagers in the car. Someone I know might do that occasionally. And the other issue is if you get in an accident. Teslas and Rivians are made of aluminum, and they require an aluminum certified auto body person to work on them. So if you have a crash, that is an issue financially because that can be an expense. But generally speaking, EVs are far more economical in the long run than internal combustion engines. And the same is true of when you consider the effect on the environment. There is embedded carbon in any product, and an EV has a little bit more embedded carbon in it on average with our current energy system than an internal combustion engine car. So if you buy a new one of each type and you put them in a museum, you could say the internal combustion engine vehicle is better for the environment than an EV. But once you begin driving, after a couple thousand miles, the EV is superior because it doesn't have the emissions, right? And then over the lifetime of the vehicle, it's an enormous difference. There is a variable, and that is the grid, and how much of the local grid is carbon-free. In our area, this is a question that comes naturally. Obviously, once you have an EV and you start thinking about those energy sources, in our area, 60% of the power from a Vista, the electric power, is hydropower. 30 to 35% is natural gas, which is, emitting, greenhouse gases, to be sure, because methane is 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. And 10% comes from the Colstrip coal plant in Montana. And its days are numbered, thankfully, and that's another interesting, complicated story. It's going to be replaced by wind turbines, which are going to use the same infrastructure, the same electrical transmission lines as has gone to the coal power plant, which is brilliant, right? That's the kind of transition we need to make. In addition to that, we can look forward to people transferring their skills from the fossil fuel industry to clean energy. So an example is geothermal drilling. Enhanced geothermal, which is going to boom soon, I hope, will use drillers from the fossil fuel industry because all of their fracking skills can be put to work for geothermal power, right? Using the more benign elements of fracking because it doesn't have to be done quite the same way as it's done to get natural gas in the Permian Basin in Texas. Next. Inflation is an issue, and fossil fuel prices play a significant role, but it's excluded from the usual economist calculations. They exclude fuel and food costs from the consumer price index for inflation. Why? Well, because they're more volatile and they throw off the trends and data lines a little bit. But objectively, we should include these factors in assessing inflation and its effects on consumers. So when we make the shift from fossil fuels, we can expect less volatility in consumer prices in general. And of course, the supply of wind and sun is unending. Once we have the infrastructure built, we have the power, and it's more predictable than the volatile fossil fuels that we get from around the world. Next. Okay, so this is a European Union data showing us the decline of coal and gas and the rise of clean energy. And they're about to meet, right? It's quite extraordinary. So Portugal, Scotland, Britain, Britain last May, a year ago, the United Kingdom had a few days where 60% of their electricity was provided by solar and wind. It's quite amazing. Offshore wind in Scotland is impressive. So if you need good news to look forward to a better future, which we often do these days, look up those kinds of things in the Manchester Guardian and elsewhere, and I find that kind of thing encouraging. Yes?
I just got back from visiting my daughter in Scotland. She keeps the temperature at her house at about 63. I was freezing.
Yes.
Because she got a $600 electric.
Wow, yes. So the question is about electricity prices in Scotland and how cold it is in the houses, because electricity costs a lot. Much of the electricity is still produced by natural gas in Britain, and so the invasion of Ukraine had a big effect on them and their energy costs. The good news related to that is that there and throughout Europe, there's been a greater impetus for replacing gas with alternative energy or clean energy. So there's more solar installation happening and more heat pumps, which are very energy efficient because they don't make heat. They use heat exchangers to bring heat from outdoors in the air or in the ground to the house, rather like a refrigerator does. And a refrigerator takes heat from one area and puts it in another. Air conditioners that are also double as heat pumps can cool or heat a house. And increasingly we'll be putting heat pumps in our houses, as the Inflation Reduction Act helps us to produce more of those, and contractors learn more. And of course, in Electrify Spokane, the part of the quest is finding the contractors who know a lot about this and installation of heat pumps and home electrification so that we can put their name in lights. Next. So this is a graph showing you the energy transition in the world. Next. So New York Times information. Different countries, and you can see the top is solar and wind. So coal and oil are in the decline, and solar and wind are on the increase. And the very fact that around the world it costs less now to produce solar and wind than it does to produce energy from oil and gas plants is extraordinarily important. Yes, next. So just to put things in perspective, in 10 years, U.S. rooftop solar has grown 10x, 10 times. Next. Okay, I love this. This is a Nextdoor discussion, and it is a discussion of the fact that electric rates have gone up. So that is often disturbing to people who post on Nextdoor. And so they're upset about the rise in electric rates, and they're not happy with the Vista. But because many of us in America don't know enough about our systems, they're having an argument about how to define a Vista. And one person complained that it was socialism, and socialism was to blame for a Vista's high electric prices. And then others said, no, it's capitalism. Capitalism is to blame for a Vista's higher electricity prices. And I thought that was wonderful as someone who teaches, just very interesting moment when they didn't know which system to use to identify what we have. And what we have is regulated monopolies that are regulated by state utility districts. And in Washington State, that is the Washington State Transportation and Utility Commission with commissioners. And none of us can name who those people are. But they have a lot of power and influence on our energy system and how we affect the energy transition. So what I find, and once you begin asking questions about electric vehicles and how we power them, is that there is a lot to know, right? That one thing leads to another, and it's a little bit like that recycling operation with which I started when I was in high school. Next. This is about invested interests, and of course, since Citizens United, we have a hard time tracking money flows. We need campaign finance reform, right, so that we can address these questions directly. So if you have extra energy after you've finished home electrification and EV adoption, you can then reform the American political system so that we can make further progress. Next. Oh, this is a Vista's advertisement telling us, while using the money we pay them, that natural gas is best because it can be relied on when wind and solar are not available. And that they weigh in on these questions while using the money we pay them is very interesting to me, right? And interesting to others throughout the country as the issue becomes clearer. Some of the utilities have worked hard to preserve the future for natural gas use, and that is where much of the debate is currently, whether or not one can prevent installation of natural gas furnaces or whether we should be installing heat pumps and electric systems from the start. So there's a lot more to be said about that. That's a separate lecture. Next. The mysterious partnership to address global emissions in Facebook wants you to know that the U.S. liquid natural gas can bolster European energy security. So they're opportunistically playing on Putin's invasion and letting us know that liquid natural gas is very important. We are producing enormous amounts of liquid natural gas and exporting it. So we're now exporting natural gas, and that affects our natural gas prices for the first time. Next. More news and an advertorial from River Partners about a dam. This is a Wall Street Journal headline that is not very accurate depiction of what's happening at Rivian. So, there are ups and downs of startups and so forth, but also tendentious headlines are noticeable. Next. This is money flow. So it tells us how our political system operates on money and works to support fossil fuel interests. Next. This is a great headline from the Washington Post. The oil executives had a convention and chuckled over how it's a fantasy to reduce our use of fossil fuels. So I would disagree. Thank you.
So John has said that we can make this slide deck available on the church website. So if you want to go into more detail, we can take a look at them then as well. So, okay.
Thank you. Please stand, join me for our last hymn. We will build a land. We'll do the first two verses. We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by love, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by love, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream.
Our closing words today come from Dean Koontz. All human lives are so profoundly and intricately entwined, those dead, those living, and those generations yet to come, that the fate of all is the fate of each, and the hope of humanity rests in every heart and in every pair of hands. Amen. Blessed be. Salam alaikum and shalom.